He was a titan of tech, on the verge of losing it all, fueled by coffee and a burning resentment for the woman he claimed had ruined him. She was the ghost of his past, a memory he had reshaped into a caricature of greed and betrayal. Ethan Hayes told anyone who would listen that his ex-wife Sophia was a ruthless gold digger who bled him dry and abandoned him. But in the pristine, unforgiving world of venture capital, ghosts don't stay buried. The anonymous investor who held the fate of his company in their hands was about to teach him that the truth is often more terrifying and more spectacular than the lies we tell ourselves. The stale scent of day-old pizza and palpable desperation clung to the air in the open plan office of Nexus Logistics. It was the smell of a dream dying. Ethan Hayes, CEO and co-founder, stared at the cash flow projection on his monitor. The glowing red numbers feeling less like data and more like a verdict. They were 90 days from insolvency, 90 days from his magnum opus, his rebellion against a world of mediocrity becoming another forgotten casualty of the startup graveyard. He ran a hand through his already disheveled brown hair, the gesture sharp with frustration. At 34, he still had the lean, hungry look of his college days, but it was now underscored by the dark smudges of sleepless nights and the tight set of his jaw. He had poured every cent, every waking hour, every drop of his soul into Nexus Logistics, an AI-driven platform designed to revolutionize supply chain management. It was brilliant, it was visionary, and it was bleeding money like a severed artery. "Any word?" Ben Carter, his co-founder, and the calming yin to his chaotic yang, asked from the adjacent desk. Ben was meticulously organizing lines of code, his methodical nature a stark contrast to Ethan's explosive energy. "Silence," Ethan grumbled, minimizing the spreadsheet of doom. "Every VC in Silicon Valley has seen our pitch. They love the tech, they love the model, and then they see the burn rate and run for the hills. We're too big a risk." "We just need one to bite," Ben said, his voice laced with a familiar weary optimism. "One believer." Ethan scoffed a bitter grating sound. "Believers. Yeah, I've had my fill of those." He leaned back in his ergonomic chair, the squeak echoing in the cavernous, mostly empty office space they could no longer afford. "You know who was a believer, Sophia?" Ben sighed, stopping his typing. He knew this path well. It was Ethan's favorite road, paved with resentment and self-pity. "Ethan, don't." "No, seriously," Ethan pressed on, his voice rising. "She believed in the big house, the fancy car, the trips to Monaco. She believed in the result, not the process. The moment things got tough, the moment my own savings had to go into the company, instead of a new designer handbag for her, she was gone." Yet the narrative was so well rehearsed, so polished from repeated tellings, that Ethan almost believed it himself. He and Sophia Rossi had been married for 5 years. 5 years that in his revised history were a long con where she played the part of the supportive wife while waiting for the IPA that would be her grand payday. "That's not fair," Ben said quietly, though he knew it was pointless to argue. "Sophia was there from the beginning. She was at the first pitch meeting, the one in that dingy coffee shop, where you spilled latte on the investor's shoes." "A performance," Ethan shot back, slamming his hand lightly on the desk. "She was playing a role, the supportive, unassuming partner, all while her eyes were on the prize. The second our divorce was finalized, she took the settlement, every penny the lawyers could get her, and vanished. Probably sunning herself in the Caymans with some crypto bro. A classic gold digger Ben. She dug for gold, found the mine was running dry, and got out before the collapse. He conveniently forgot that the settlement had been modest, barely enough to cover her legal fees and a deposit on a small apartment. He forgot that she had worked 2 jobs in their early years to support them while he coded Nexus Logistics into existence in their cramped apartment. He forgot her quiet encouragement, her belief in him when no one else did. His wounded pride had papered over those memories with the wallpaper of betrayal. It was easier to blame her than to face the terrifying possibility that he, Ethan Hayes, the boy genius, might simply fail. She called me a dreamer once. Ethan continued, his voice dripping with scorn. But she didn't mean it as a compliment. She meant I was unrealistic. She wanted the guaranteed payout, not the struggle. When I told her I was mortgaging the house to fund the second seed round, you should have seen her face. Pure terror. Not for me, not for us, for her safety net. Ben stayed silent, letting his friend vent. The truth was, Ben had always liked Sophia. He saw a quiet strength in her, a depth that Ethan, in his whirlwind of ambition, had seemed to overlook. Ben remembered Sophia bringing homemade dinners to the office during late nights, asking intelligent questions about the software architecture and calming Ethan down during his frequent moments of near-manic panic. The woman Ethan described sounded like a stranger. Ethan's rant was cut short by the ping of an incoming email. He glanced at his screen, his expression shifting from anger to weary curiosity. The subject line was stark and impersonal. Subject: investment inquiry, Nexus Logistics. His heart gave a little flutter. Another rejection, probably. A polite, "We'll keep you in our thoughts," email. He clicked it open. To Ethan Hayes, CEO, from Evelyn Reed Senior, Analyst, AR Ventures, Mr. Hayes. We have been following the progress of Nexus Logistics with considerable interest. Your technology has disruptive potential, but your current financial trajectory is unsustainable. My principal is interested in exploring a potential Series A investment to facilitate a strategic pivot and ensure long-term viability. This would not be a standard investment. We would require a majority stake, 2 board seats, and final say on all budgetary and strategic decisions for the next 24 months. If these preliminary terms are not immediately disqualifying, I am available to meet tomorrow at 10 a.m. at our offices. Regards, Evelyn Reed, AR Ventures, 1 Embarcadero Center, San Francisco. Ethan read it twice, then a third time. AR Ventures. He'd never heard of them. The name was generic, almost deliberately obscure, but the address was prime real estate. And the tone of the email, it wasn't a negotiation. It was a demand. Majority stake, final say. They wanted to buy his company, gut it, and run it themselves. What is it? Ben asked, noticing the color drain from Ethan's face. Ethan swiveled his monitor around. Ben leaned in, his eyes scanning the text. He let out a low whistle. A majority stake. They want to take the whole thing, Ethan. This is a vulture fund picking at the carcass. Maybe, Ethan said, a strange light glinting in his eyes. Or maybe it's the only lifeboat left. He looked around the silent office at the empty desks and the motivational posters that now seemed to mock him. Disrupt or be disrupted. This isn't an investor, Ethan. It's a dictator, Ben warned. You'd be CEO in name only. You'd lose control of your own creation. My creation is about to be homeless and unemployed. Ethan countered, his voice raw. I'll be the CEO of absolutely nothing in 3 months. Control, I've lost control already. The numbers on that spreadsheet are in control now. He thought of Sophia. The bitterness churned in his gut. This was her fault. Her lack of faith, her abandonment had set this failure in motion. At least that's the story he told himself. Now, some faceless, soulless corporate entity was offering him a humiliating deal to save the company he had once promised her would change the world. The irony was a bitter pill, but swallowing a bitter pill was better than choking on failure. He turned back to his keyboard and began to type. Ms. Reed. The terms are aggressive, but not disqualifying. I will be there at 10 a.m. tomorrow. Ethan Hayes. As he hit send, he felt a cold dread mix with a flicker of hope. He was making a deal with the devil to save his dream. He had no idea that the devil he imagined was nothing compared to the ghost he had spent years trying to exorcise. The lobby of 1 Embarcadero Center was designed to intimidate. Soaring ceilings, acres of polished marble, and a silence so profound it seemed to absorb sound. It was the cathedral of capital, and Ethan felt like a blasphemer entering the pews, dressed in his best and only suit, which felt a size too tight and a decade out of style. He approached the security desk, his own reflection, a pale, anxious stranger in the mirrored walls. Ethan Hayes to see Evelyn Reed, AR Ventures. The guard checked his list with an air of bored authority before gesturing him towards a dedicated elevator bank. 45th floor. The elevator ride was a silent, stomach-lurching ascent. As the doors opened, Ethan stepped into the offices of AR Ventures. There was no bustling bullpen, no noise, no chaos. It was a serene, minimalist space, decorated in shades of charcoal and cream, with panoramic views of the San Francisco Bay. It whispered of quiet, immense wealth. The kind of wealth that didn't need to shout. A woman rose from behind a stark white desk to greet him. She was perhaps in her late 40s, with silver-streaked hair pulled into a severe chignon, and a bespoke pantsuit that probably cost more than his monthly payroll. Her eyes behind sharp designer glasses were intelligent and completely unreadable. "Mr. Hayes, I'm Evelyn Reed. Thank you for coming." Her handshake was firm, her voice crisp. She didn't offer a smile. "This way." She led him to a conference room, dominated by a single massive slab of dark wood. The view of the Golden Gate Bridge was breathtaking, a calculated display of power. He was being shown just how small he was in the grand scheme of things. "Please," she gestured to a chair. "Coffee water." "Water is fine, thank you." Evelyn poured him a glass from a frosted pitcher before taking a seat opposite him, placing a slim tablet on the table between them. "Let's not waste each other's time, Mr. Hayes. You're out of cash. Your last two potential clients went with a competitor. Your CTO quit 2 months ago, and you've been unable to fill the position. You are, for all intents and purposes, dead in the water." Every word was a perfectly aimed dart, puncturing his pride. He just nodded his throat tight. "Your information is accurate." It always is, she stated, not as a boast, but as a fact. "My principal believes in your core technology. The predictive logistics algorithm is, and I quote, exceptionally elegant. However, the execution and business strategy have been lacking. I've been working with limited resources." Ethan defended, his voice strained. "You've been working with a limited vision," Evelyn countered smoothly. "You've been focused on acquiring a handful of large enterprise-level clients, a long and expensive sales cycle. You've ignored the far more lucrative market of mid-sized e-commerce businesses who would pay a premium for even a 5% increase in efficiency." Ethan stared at her. She had just laid out the exact pivot he and Ben had discussed in hushed, desperate tones just weeks ago. A pivot they lacked the capital to even attempt. "Who is your principal?" Ethan asked, unable to hold back the question. "Who is behind AR Ventures?" Evelyn offered the faintest hint of a smile, a slight upward twitch of her lips. "My principal values privacy above all else. You will communicate with us through me. The name is non-negotiable. For all official purposes, you are dealing with AR Ventures, a private equity firm. Is that a problem?" "It's unorthodox. We are not an orthodox firm," she replied, tapping her tablet. A detailed financial model of Nexus Logistics appeared on the large screen on the wall. "Here is our offer. $10 million, wired to your account within 48 hours of signing. This will cover your debts, allow for a 50% staff increase, and fund an aggressive 18-month marketing strategy targeting the mid-market sector. $10 million. The number hung in the air, shimmering like a mirage. It was more than he had dreamed of. It was salvation. "In exchange," she continued, her voice hardening slightly, "we take a 51% equity stake. We appoint 2 members to the board of directors, myself, and a representative from our legal team. Your co-founder, Mr. Carter, will be offered the role of Chief Technology Officer with a significant salary increase. His position is non-negotiable. Ethan blinked. They had researched Ben too. They saw his value perhaps even more than Ethan had acknowledged recently. "And me?" Ethan asked. "You will remain CEO," Evelyn said. "However, any expenditure over $50,000, any hiring or firing of senior staff, and any strategic shift will require board approval. Our approval. You will have a generous salary, a performance-based bonus structure, and all the resources you need to succeed. But you will have a boss. To be perfectly clear, Mr. Hayes, we are investing in your algorithm, not your autonomy." It was a gilded cage, the most beautiful, well-appointed prison he could imagine. He would be the face of the company, but the soul would belong to the ghost in the machine, this mysterious principal who dissected his company from afar. He thought of the alternative, the humiliating phone call to his father admitting he'd failed, the crushing weight of letting Ben down, the smug "I told you so" he imagined on Sophia's face, wherever she was. Pride was a luxury he could no longer afford. "Your principal, they're in tech?" he asked, grasping for any detail. "My principal has a diverse portfolio, but possesses a deep and practical understanding of software architecture and market dynamics," Evelyn said evasively. "All you need to know is that our guidance will be precise, informed, and non-negotiable." He looked out the window at the bridge, a marvel of engineering and ambition. Someone had to dream it, and someone else had to fund it. He had been the dreamer. Now he needed a funder, even one who would put him in chains. "You'll have the signed documents by the end of the day," Ethan said, his voice sounding hollow to his own ears. Evelyn Reed nodded, a flicker of something, perhaps respect, perhaps satisfaction in her eyes. "A wise decision, Mr. Hayes. Welcome to our ventures." As he walked out of the building and back into the normal world, the San Francisco fog rolling in felt less like weather and more like a metaphor for his future. He had saved his company, but he felt strangely like he had just sold his soul. The check would be real, the jobs would be safe, the technology would live on, but he was no longer a master of his own destiny. He was a high-priced employee, a puppet for a phantom investor who knew his every weakness. And as he hailed a cab, a bitter thought surfaced, even at his lowest. Sophia had only taken a small settlement. This new partner had taken everything. The first year of their marriage was lived in a blur of cheap wine, takeout cartons, and shared dreams whispered in the dark. Their apartment in Mountain View was small, with peeling paint and a temperamental furnace, but it felt like a palace. Ethan, then a junior programmer at a large tech firm, would come home buzzing with ideas, sketching algorithms on napkins, while Sophia, a paralegal at a small family law practice, would listen, her chin resting on her hand, her dark eyes filled with a fierce, quiet pride. "It's not just about moving boxes, Soph," he'd explain, his hands waving animatedly. "It's about prediction. It's about seeing the future of a supply chain. We could eliminate waste, save companies millions, make everything faster, smarter." "I know, Ethan," she'd say, her smile soft and genuine. "I believe you. It's brilliant." She was the one who encouraged him to quit his stable job. "You're suffocating there," she had told him one evening as they sat on their lumpy sofa. "This idea, Nexus, it's what you're meant to do. We'll manage. I can pick up more hours. We'll make it work." He had resisted, terrified of the instability. It was her faith that had given him the courage to take the leap. She sold her reliable sedan, a graduation gift from her parents, and used the money to buy him a top-of-the-line computer and 3 months of server space. "An investment in our future," she'd called it, kissing him amidst a tangle of Ethernet cables. Those were the memories his pride had worked so hard to bury. In his mind, the Sophia of the past had become a two-dimensional villain, but the truth was a far more complex and painful photograph. The cracks began to show, not with a bang, but with a slow, creeping erosion. As Nexus Logistics gained a little traction and secured its first round of angel funding, Ethan changed. The frantic energy that had once been charmingly passionate curdled into a relentless, all-consuming obsession. He stopped coming home for dinner. The whispered dreams were replaced by terse, late-night phone calls about term sheets and server latency. He saw his sacrifice as noble. He was building an empire for them. He failed to see that she wasn't interested in an empire. She was interested in a partnership. The fight that he would later twist into his proof of her greed happened on a Tuesday. He came home buzzing with a dangerous energy, waving a stack of papers. "We got it," he announced, his eyes wild with victory. "A bridge loan, $500,000. It's enough to hire a real sales team." Sophia looked at the papers, her brow furrowed. "Ethan, it's a second mortgage on the house. The interest rate is insane." Their small house, their first major purchase, was their only real asset. "It's business, Soph. You have to be aggressive. You have to take risks," he said, dismissing her concern. "I believe in taking risks," she said, her voice steady but strained. "I don't believe in betting our home on a maybe. What happens if it doesn't work out? We lose everything." "Unbelievable," he scoffed, throwing the papers on the counter. "This is what I'm talking about. You don't get it. You don't have the stomach for this." "The stomach for what? For being homeless?" she shot back, her voice rising for the first time. "I have a stomach for hard work, Ethan. I've been working 60-hour weeks to make sure our bills are paid while you chase this dream. Don't you dare tell me I don't have the stomach for it. This isn't about your little paralegal job." He snapped the words instantly regrettable. "This is the big leagues. This is about creating generational wealth. Isn't that what you want? The nice things, the security." He was projecting his own fears and ambitions onto her. He was the one who craved the validation of wealth, the status that came with a successful exit. He had started Nexus to change the world, but somewhere along the way, it had become about proving he was a titan. Her face fell. The anger drained away, replaced by a profound, chilling sadness. "Generational wealth? Is that what you think I want?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "I wanted a life with you, Ethan. The man who drew ideas on napkins. I don't even know who you are anymore." That was the moment the marriage truly broke. They coexisted for another year, two strangers sharing a mortgage. He saw her quiet withdrawal as disapproval, her pleas for him to take a vacation as a distraction from his vital work. He interpreted her worry as a lack of faith in his genius. The divorce was quiet and brutal. He hired a shark of a lawyer who painted Sophia as opportunistic. She in turn hired a modest, practical attorney and asked for very little, just enough to start over free from the crushing weight of his ambition. Ethan, deep in his own narrative of victimhood, saw this not as an act of dignity, but as a sign of weakness. She knew she couldn't get any more, he told Ben. She took what she could and ran. One final petty act cemented his view of her. His grandfather's vintage wristwatch, a treasured heirloom, went missing during the move-out. It was a beautiful, simple timepiece, a symbol of a bygone era of craftsmanship and integrity. He accused her of taking it, of pawning it for cash. "It's just a watch, Ethan," she had said, her eyes weary with a sadness he mistook for guilt. "You have so much already." He didn't hear the subtext, that he had so much and valued so little. He only heard a confession. In his mind, she had sold a piece of his family's history for a few $100s. She was in his final judgment, a woman with no soul, no loyalty, only a calculator where her heart should be. This was the architecture of his grudge, a foundation of misinterpreted intentions, walls of projected insecurity, and a roof of wounded pride. He had built it meticulously, brick by brick, until he could live inside it, safe from the truth that he had been the one who dismantled their life together, so focused on building his monument that he never noticed he was using the stones from his own home. Life, under the reign of AR Ventures, was a jarring new reality. The $10 million arrived as promised, a staggering sum that cleared their debts overnight and filled the company coffers. The office, once a tomb of impending failure, buzzed with new energy. They hired a dozen of the brightest engineers and marketing minds in the Bay Area. The pivot to the mid-market sector, once a desperate fantasy, was now a meticulously executed strategy guided by the unseen hand of the principal. The guidance came exclusively through Evelyn Reed. She was a constant, formidable presence. Her emails were terse and brilliant. Her weekly calls were interrogations disguised as check-ins. She would dissect their progress reports with surgical precision, her questions revealing a terrifyingly deep understanding of their business. "Mr. Hayes," she said. During one such call, her voice cool and impassive through the speakerphone, "Your customer acquisition cost is 7% higher than our projections. The data suggests your digital ad spend is over-indexed on LinkedIn and under-indexed on targeted industry podcasts. Please adjust the allocation by end of day." Ethan, who had once prided himself on his marketing instincts, was silenced. She was right. He and his new marketing head had looked at the same data and missed it completely. Ben, in his new role as CTO, was thriving. Freed from the constant anxiety of bankruptcy, he dove into refining the algorithm. The principal, via Evelyn, would send occasional cryptic notes of feedback on the code itself. "Ben, I got another one," he said one afternoon, walking over to Ethan's desk, looking baffled. He held up his phone. "It just says, consider a recursive function for the batch processing query. Will reduce server load during peak hours." Who is this person? They're looking at our raw code. They're a programmer, Ethan. A damn good one. Ethan felt a knot of resentment tighten in his stomach. He was the CEO, but he felt like an imposter in his own company. He was living in the gilded cage, and the bars felt colder every day. He had the corner office, now the one with the best view, but it felt borrowed. He was executing someone else's vision, a vision that was infuriatingly working perfectly. Within 6 months, Nexus Logistics had signed over 40 new clients. Their monthly recurring revenue shot past figures he had only dreamed of. They were the new darlings of the tech press, a phoenix from the ashes story. And in every interview, Ethan had to smile and talk about his visionary strategy, all while knowing the true visionary was a ghost named Principal. His obsession with the investor's identity grew into a fever. He tried searching for AR Ventures, but the digital footprint was almost non-existent. It was a shell corporation. Within a shell corporation, a financial nesting doll designed for ultimate anonymity. The A and the R must be initials. Adam Reed, Arthur Roberts. He spent late nights scrolling through lists of high-net-worth individuals, tech billionaires, and retired CEOs looking for a match. It was a fruitless, maddening exercise. The control was absolute. When Ethan wanted to acquire a small, promising logistics startup, Evelyn shut it down with a one-line email. "Their code is inefficient and their market is a dead end. Do not pursue." 2 months later, that same startup went bankrupt. The principal's foresight was unnervingly perfect. The new board meetings were sterile, efficient affairs. It was Ethan and Ben on one side of the giant table, and Evelyn Reed and a silent, hawk-eyed lawyer named Mr. Davies on the other. They didn't debate, they were given directives. "We will be opening a European headquarters in Dublin within the next quarter," Evelyn announced at one meeting. "The groundwork has already been laid." "Dublin?" Ethan asked, flabbergasted. "I thought Germany made more sense for the manufacturing base." "You thought wrong," Evelyn stated, not unkindly, but with a finality that brooked no argument. "The Irish market provides a more favourable tax structure and a larger pool of multilingual tech talent. A location has been scouted. A list of potential candidates for the general manager position will be on your desk by Monday." Ethan felt a surge of hot fury. And I'm supposed to just go along with this. I'm the CEO. Evelyn looked at him, her expression uncharacteristically patient. Mr. Hayes, you are an excellent product visionary. Your original algorithm is proof of that. But your operational and strategic instincts are frankly your weakness. We are providing the scaffolding you need to build your skyscraper. Do you want to argue about the quality of the steel, or do you want to see the building finished? He slumped back in his chair, defeated. She was right. He hated that she was right. He hated the anonymous principal for being right. He hated this feeling of being a passenger in the high-speed vehicle his life had become. The money, the success, the praise, it all felt hollow. It wasn't truly his. He was a fraud, propped up by a mystery benefactor. He would walk through his bustling office, see the happy, productive employees, and feel a profound sense of alienation. He had saved the company, only to lose himself. And through it all, the ghost of Sophia lingered. Sometimes, in moments of triumph, he would feel a pang of regret. He wished he could show her that he had made it just to prove her wrong. The success felt tainted, but it was success nonetheless. He pictured her living her simple life, completely oblivious to the empire he was now managing. The thought gave him a small petty satisfaction. He clung to his grudge because it was the only thing that felt entirely his own. It was the one part of his story that the principal couldn't control. The seed of doubt was planted on a rainy Thursday afternoon. Ethan was in a rare moment of peace, walking through a small park near the office to clear his head, when he bumped into Maya Lynn, a mutual friend from his and Sophia's early days. Maya was an artist, a woman who moved through the world with an observant gentleness that Ethan had always found a bit naive. Ethan Hayes. My God, I read about you in TechCrunch. You're a rock star. She greeted him with a warm hug. Hardly. He laughed, a bit uncomfortable with the praise. Just trying to keep the ship afloat. You're doing more than that from the sounds of it. It's amazing, she said. I'm so happy for you. Sophia would be too. Ethan's smile tightened. I doubt that. We don't exactly keep in touch. Maya tilted her head, a confused frown on her face. Really? That's a shame. You know, for all that happened, she was always your biggest fan. It was never about the money for her, Ethan. You know that, right? We had different ideas about what success looked like. He said, the old rehearsed line coming out automatically. I guess, Maya said, though she looked unconvinced. I just remember her selling her car to buy you that first supercomputer. And remember when she took on all that freelance legal transcription work, staying up all night, just so you could afford to go to that tech conference in Austin. She came to my studio once, utterly exhausted, and all she could talk about was how your keynote was going to blow everyone away. She had this absolute faith in your brilliance. Ethan stood frozen on the wet pavement. He had forgotten that. He'd forgotten the all-nighters she pulled, the sacrifices she made that he'd taken for granted. In his narrative, she was the one holding him back, afraid of risk. But Maya's words painted a different picture, a woman who had shouldered immense risk for him, who had worked herself to the bone, not for a future payday, but because she believed in his dream. The memory of the car, the conference, it was like a key turning in a long-locked room in his mind. The carefully constructed walls of his grudge trembled. I had forgotten about that, he admitted, his voice quiet. Well, don't, Maya said softly. Whatever happened between you two, don't forget that part. It was real. The conversation unsettled him for days. He found himself replaying old memories, but this time through a new lens. Her fear over mortgaging the house, was it greed, or was it genuine terror of losing their shared sanctuary? Her withdrawal during their last year together, was it disapproval, or was it the quiet grief of a woman watching her husband disappear into his own ambition? The next crack in his narrative came from an unexpected source, Evelyn Reed. They were in a late-night meeting finalizing the acquisition of a small German analytics firm, a move the principal had identified as critical for their European expansion. The deal was complex, the negotiations fraught. Ethan was exhausted and on edge. Their founder is playing hardball, Ethan vented, pacing his office. He's posturing, trying to squeeze another 200 grand out of us. He's not posturing, he's scared, Evelyn said calmly, reviewing the documents on her screen from her own office across town. His father founded that company. He feels like he's selling his family legacy. The money is secondary to his pride. So what do we do? Walk away? No, Evelyn said. You appeal to that legacy. You insert a clause that keeps him on as a paid consultant for 2 years and name the new integrated software module after his father. You give him dignity, not just cash. It shows respect for the work, not just the asset. Ethan stopped pacing. The advice was shrewd, insightful, and deeply empathetic. It was a move that went beyond the cold calculus of business. It was human. It didn't fit his image of the ruthless, faceless principal. That's a good idea, he conceded. It's the correct one, Evelyn replied. Sometimes people just want to know that what they built mattered. There was a brief pause, and in that silence, Evelyn said something that would haunt him. My principal has a strong belief in honoring the foundations of things. Honoring the foundations. The phrase echoed in his mind. It sounded so unlike a corporate raider. That weekend, driven by a strange compulsion he didn't understand, he went up to his attic. He was looking for old company prototypes, but he found himself rummaging through a box labeled Old Memories. Inside were photos from the early years of his marriage. There they were smiling on a beach, covered in paint, from renovating their first home, holding the keys to the house he had later risked without her consent. He saw the woman Maya had described, bright, loving, and full of hope. Then he found an empty velvet box. It was the box for his grandfather's watch. The anger, so familiar and comforting, flared up again. This was the proof. This was the real Sophia, the woman who would steal a family heirloom. He slammed the box shut, the dust motes dancing in the dim light. Maya was a romantic. Evelyn Reed was just a clever negotiator. Sophia was a thief. He needed to believe it. It was the only thing holding his version of the world together. But the foundation was cracked. The lie was unraveling, whether he was ready to admit it or not. Nexus Logistics was no longer a startup. It was an institution. The acquisition of the German firm was a resounding success, and their new European headquarters was thriving. They were now valued at over $900 million, and a major tech conglomerate, a giant in the industry, had made an official acquisition offer. It was the exit Ethan had once dreamed of, a multi-billion-dollar deal that would make him and his anonymous partner titans of the industry. The final meeting to approve the sale was scheduled. The conglomerate's CEO would be there, and for the first time, the principal of AR Ventures had agreed to attend in person. They're finally going to show themselves, Ben asked, his eyes wide with disbelief as they stood in Ethan's office. After all this time, who do you think it is? I don't know, and I don't care. Ethan lied, his heart hammering against his ribs. Let's just close this deal and be done with it. The meeting was set for the 50th floor of a different skyscraper, a neutral territory chosen by the conglomerate. Ethan felt a nervous energy he hadn't experienced since his first pitch meeting. This was it, the culmination of everything. He would finally come face to face with the puppet master who had saved and controlled him. He imagined a Howard Hughes-like recluse, a grizzled Wall Street legend, or a young, arrogant tech prodigy who had made his fortune in crypto. He and Ben rode the elevator up in silence. They walked into the boardroom, a magnificent space with a 360-degree view of the city. The CEO of the conglomerate, a well-known industry figure named David Chen, was already there along with his team. Evelyn Reed stood by the window, a picture of calm authority. "Ethan, Ben, good to see you," Chen said, shaking their hands warmly. "A remarkable company you've built." "We had good partners," Ethan replied, glancing at Evelyn. She gave a slight nod. My principal is on their way. They all took their seats around the enormous table. The air was thick with anticipation. Ethan's leg bounced nervously under the table. He fiddled with the cuff of his expensive, custom-tailored shirt, a shirt bought with the money the principal had provided. The door to the boardroom opened. Ethan looked up, expecting to see a man in a power suit. Instead, a woman walked in. She was dressed in a simple but impeccably tailored navy blue dress. Her dark hair was pulled back in an elegant low ponytail. Her face was one he knew better than his own, yet it was completely transformed. The uncertainty he remembered was gone, replaced by a quiet, unshakable confidence. The sadness in her eyes had been supplanted by a sharp, clear-eyed intelligence. It was Sophia Rossi. The world tilted on its axis. The air left Ethan's lungs in a silent gasp. He felt the blood drain from his face. It was as if a ghost had materialized in the room, but this was no phantom. This was real. Ben stared, his mouth agape. David Chen and his team looked on, confused by the sudden palpable tension. Evelyn Reed was the only one who seemed unsurprised. "Gentlemen," she said, her voice cutting through the stunned silence, "may I introduce the founder and principal of AR Ventures, Ms. Sophia Rossi." Sophia's eyes met Ethan's. There was no malice in them, no triumph, just a calm, level gaze that seemed to see right through him, through all the years of lies and resentment, and into the broken core of the man he was. "Hello, Ethan," she said, her voice even and steady. It was the same voice that had once whispered encouragement in their tiny apartment, now wielded with the authority of a kingmaker. Ethan couldn't speak. His mind was a maelstrom of confusion, humiliation, and a dawning, horrifying understanding. AR Ventures. AR. Arthur Rossi. Her initials. Sophia Amelia Rossi. He had been so blind, so consumed by his own narrative that he'd missed the most obvious clue. "You," he finally managed to stammer, his voice a hoarse whisper. "How—" "My grandmother," Sophia said simply, taking a seat at the head of the table, a spot that was clearly hers. She was a very shrewd woman who lived a very simple life. She invested in some tech companies in the early 80s. Apple, Microsoft. She left me a small portfolio when she passed. I let it grow. She paused, letting the information sink in. "I never told you because I knew you. You would have seen it as your seed money, your resource to burn through. It was mine, and I chose to invest it wisely." Every word was a blow. Her quiet life, her modest job, it had all been a choice. She had possessed a fortune he couldn't have imagined, all while he was calling her a gold digger for wanting to protect their small home. "You knew I was going to fail," he said, the accusation weak, pathetic. "No," Sophia corrected him gently. "I knew your idea was going to succeed. I also knew your pride and your arrogance were going to get in the way. I didn't invest in you, Ethan, not the you that you had become. I invested in Nexus Logistics, and I put safeguards in place, Evelyn, the board, the strict oversight to protect my investment from your worst instincts." Her explanation of the pivot to the mid-market, her analysis of his flawed strategy, her deep understanding of his code, it all crashed down on him. The principal, who had seen his weaknesses so clearly, was the person who had once known him best. The humiliation was a physical force, pressing down on him, stealing his breath. Every angry word he had ever spoken about her, every bitter complaint to Ben, every self-pitying monologue, she had been the one signing his paychecks the entire time. She had listened to him call her a gold digger while she was single-handedly funding his redemption. He thought of his grandfather's watch, the final damning piece of evidence of her supposed greed. As if reading his mind, Sophia reached into her handbag. She pulled out a small, soft leather pouch and slid it across the polished table towards him. "I kept this for you," she said. "You were so chaotic when we separated, I was afraid you'd lose it. I was waiting for the right moment to give it back." He slowly opened the pouch. Inside, gleaming under the boardroom lights, was his grandfather's watch. It was ticking. That was the moment he finally completely broke. It wasn't just about the money or the company. It was the crushing, undeniable proof of his own monstrous delusion. He hadn't just been wrong about her. He had been cruel. He had slandered her name and her character to anyone who would listen, all while she was quietly, brilliantly, and generously saving him from himself. He looked at her, truly. Looked at her for the first time in years. Not as his ex-wife, not as a ghost from his past, but as the formidable, intelligent, and graceful woman sitting at the head of the table. The woman who had outplayed him in every conceivable way, not for revenge, but because she believed in the one good thing he had created. The room was silent. David Chen and his team looked back and forth between them, finally understanding that this wasn't just a business deal. It was a reckoning. Ethan Hayes, the tech titan, the comeback kid, had never felt so small. The billion-dollar acquisition was put on hold. David Chen, sensing the seismic emotional shift in the room, tactfully suggested they table the final decision for a week to allow the partners of Nexus Logistics to align internally. It was a corporate euphemism for deal with the apocalyptic drama that just unfolded. As soon as Chen's team had left, Ben let out a long, slow breath. "I think I'll go get us some coffee," he said, giving Ethan and Sophia a wide berth as he practically fled the room. He was a good friend, and he knew this was a conversation that could only happen between two people. For a long time, neither Ethan nor Sophia spoke. The silence in the cavernous boardroom was absolute, broken only by the distant hum of the city below. Ethan stared at the watch in his hand, its steady, ticking a counterpoint to the chaotic drumming of his heart. Finally, he looked up, his eyes meeting hers. The anger was gone. The pride was shattered. All that was left was a raw, gaping shame. "I'm sorry," he said. The words felt laughably inadequate, a tiny bandage on a mortal wound. "Sophia, there are no words. What I said about you, what I thought," he trailed off, shaking his head. It was monstrous. Sophia simply nodded, her expression patient, waiting. She wasn't going to make this easy for him, nor was she going to rub salt in the wound. She was simply going to let him sit with the truth. "I built a whole story in my head," he continued, his voice cracking. "A story where I was the victim and you were the villain. It was easier than admitting that I was failing, that I was scared, that I had become so obsessed with being a success that I destroyed the only thing that actually mattered." He looked at her, his gaze unflinching. "I destroyed us." "Yes," she said softly, "you did." There was no accusation in her tone, only a sad acknowledgement of fact. "You disappeared, Ethan. You were so busy building an empire that you forgot to be a husband, a partner. The man I fell in love with wouldn't have called me a gold digger. He would have been my biggest champion, just as I was his." He flinched at the word gold digger, landing like a physical blow. "Why?" he asked, his voice full of genuine confusion. "After all of that, after how I treated you, why would you do this? Why would you save me?" "I told you," she said, leaning forward slightly. "I didn't save you. I saved the company. I saved the idea that was born on a napkin in our tiny apartment. It was a brilliant idea, Ethan. It deserved to exist. And," she added, a hint of a sad smile touching her lips, "I suppose a part of me hoped that if you were freed from the terror of failure, you might find your way back to being a better man. Not for me, for yourself." It was the most devastatingly generous thing he had ever heard. It wasn't an act of love, not anymore. It was an act of profound, detached grace. She had wanted him to be better, even if she had no intention of being around to see it. "The money," he said, still trying to wrap his head around it. "You had all that, and you never said a word." "It was my grandmother's legacy," she explained. "She taught me that money is a tool, not a trophy. You saw wealth as the end game, the proof of your worth. I saw it as a means to create, to build, to protect what's valuable." I couldn't let your ambition swallow my inheritance, so I built my own firm with my own rules. She gestured to the empty chair where Evelyn had sat. I hired the best people who understood my philosophy. We've funded a dozen companies, mostly led by women, and underrepresented founders who just needed a chance. Ethan listened, humbled and awestruck. While he had been nursing his petty grudge, she had been quietly, effectively changing the world, using her power not to dominate but to empower. She had become everything he had pretended he wanted to be. He stood up and walked to the window, looking out over the city. "We sell the company," he said, his back to her. "The deal is good. You get your return, a massive one. You can fund 100 more companies with it." "And you?" she asked. "What will you do?" He turned around. "I think I'll take some time off, for the first time in a decade." He looked at the watch, then back at her. "Thank you for keeping this safe." "You're welcome." The air between them had shifted. The romantic love was long dead, buried under years of bitterness and misunderstanding. But in its place, something new was beginning to form, a deep, profound, and humbling respect. He finally saw her not as his ex-wife, but as Sophia Rossi, a brilliant strategist, a compassionate investor, and a far better person than he had been. "So, Ms. Rossi," he said, a ghost of a real smile on his face, "shall we go sell our company for a few $1 billion?" Sophia's answering smile was small, but genuine. "I believe that's the correct strategic move, Mr. Hayes." They were no longer husband and wife. They were not friends, not yet. But they were partners finally, in the truest sense of the word, standing on a new foundation, not of shared love, but of shared success, and a hard-won, devastating truth. In the end, Ethan didn't just gain a fortune, he regained a piece of his humanity. The story of Ethan and Sophia isn't just about a shocking business reveal, it's a powerful lesson in perspective. It shows how easily we can become the villains in our own stories, twisting facts to soothe a bruised ego. We often build walls of resentment to protect ourselves from the truth, never realizing that the person on the other side might not be an enemy, but a silent architect of our salvation. Their journey reminds us that the people we underestimate often possess a strength and brilliance we are simply too blind to see.
What happens when a man's final cruel prophecy is shattered in the most spectacular way imaginable? For Emma Vance, the final words her celebrity ex-husband, Julian Thorne, ever spoke to her were a curse. "You're nothing without me. No one will ever want you. You will die alone." He said it with the smug certainty of a man who believed he had authored her entire existence. But what Julian didn't count on, what the world couldn't have predicted, was that the universe had a flair for irony. Less than 12 hours later, Emma Vance wouldn't just be fine. She'd be on the front page of every major news outlet, her name a global trending topic, all because of a single candid photograph, her hand held gently, securely in the hand of the world's most enigmatic and untouchable billionaire. This isn't just a story about revenge, it's about what happens the morning after your world ends. The air in the penthouse was cold. It wasn't the fault of the climate control, a state-of-the-art system Julian Thorne had often boasted about in interviews for architectural magazines. It was a frigid, soul-deep cold that emanated from the man himself. Julian, with his perfectly coiffed silver hair and a smile engineered for talk show sofas, stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows looking down at the sparkling expanse of New York City as if he owned it. In many ways, he thought he did. "It's all signed Emma," he said, not turning to look at her. His voice, the same one that calmed millions of his followers with platitudes about unlocking your inner power, was now clipped and sharp, a shard of glass. Emma Vance clutched the pen in her hand, her knuckles white. The final divorce paper sat on the vast marble island in the kitchen, a kitchen she had designed from the veining in the stone to the specific shade of brushed brass on the handles. It was a space meant for warmth, for laughter, for the life she thought they were building. Now, it was just a stage for her public execution. "I know, Julian," she whispered. Her voice was hoarse. She hadn't slept in days. For 10 years, she had been Mrs. Thorne, the quiet, supportive wife of the self-help magnate Julian Thorne, author of the global bestseller The Architect of You. She had been the one who edited his manuscripts until 3 in the morning, who fact-checked his research, who coached him through his anxieties before every major speech. She had sacrificed her own burgeoning career as an academic, specializing in Renaissance art, to build his empire, believing his success was their success. The cracks had started as hairline fractures. His casual dismissal of her opinions, his gaslighting her memories of events, the way he'd subtly mock her in front of their influential friends. Then came the affairs which he'd explained away as the unfortunate but necessary burdens of a man of his stature. The final break came when she discovered he wasn't just having an affair. He had a long-term partner, a younger, more malleable version of herself, already installed in a condo he'd bought downtown. Good. He finally turned his eyes, sweeping over her with disdain. She wore a simple grey cashmere sweater and jeans, a stark contrast to his tailored Zegna suit. She felt like a ghost in her own home. "The movers will be here tomorrow for my remaining effects. Your things? Well, you don't have much, do you? I'll have them put in storage. You have 30 days to collect them." Every word was a calculated blow. He knew her things were mostly books, research papers, and sentimental items from her family, things that held no monetary value to him. "Where am I supposed to go, Julian?" She asked the question, tasting like ash. The penthouse was in his name. The bank accounts had been systematically drained into trusts she couldn't access. Her lawyer, a timid man overwhelmed by Julian's legal Rottweilers, had managed to secure her a settlement that was, in Julian's world, pocket change. It was enough to live on for a year, maybe 2, if she was frugal. It was an insult disguised as a severance package. He smirked, a cruel twisting of the lips that never reached his televised eyes. "I don't know, Emma. That's your problem now, isn't it? You wanted to be independent. So be independent." He walked over to the island, picking up his pristine leather briefcase. He didn't even glance at her. He was already moving on. Tears pricked at her eyes, hot and shameful. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction. She straightened her back, lifting her chin. "I will." Her defiance seemed to amuse him. He paused at the door, turning back for one final devastating volley. His face was a mask of mock pity. "You know, I almost feel sorry for you," he said, his voice dropping into the intimate conspiratorial tone he used on his podcasts. "You poured everything into me. You have no career, no connections of your own. You're, what, 36? Past your prime, darling. The world is a brutal place for women like you." He stepped closer, his expensive cologne suffocating her. He leaned, in his voice a venomous whisper, in her ear. "Let me give you one last piece of free advice, my dear ex-wife. No one will ever want you. You're nothing without me. You carry the stench of failure. Men of quality, men of substance, they want a winner. They don't want someone's discarded leftovers. You will die alone." He pulled back, a look of profound satisfaction on his face. He had delivered his curse. It was the final brick in the wall he had built around her heart. And then he was gone. The heavy door clicked shut, the sound echoing in the cavernous, empty space. For a long moment, Emma didn't move. She just stood there, his words slithering into the cracks of her broken confidence. No one will ever want you. You will die alone. She finally let out a ragged sob, collapsing against the cold marble. The city lights outside blurred into a cruel, glittering mockery. Julian was right. She had given him her youth, her intellect, her loyalty. And in return, he had taken her name, her home, her future, and left her with nothing but a curse ringing in her ears. In that moment, sitting alone in the ruins of her life, she believed him. The next few weeks were a blur of beige. Beige boxes, beige walls of a tiny third-floor walk-up in Brooklyn, and a beige, flavorless existence. Emma had found the apartment in a daze. It was all she could afford. The grand views of Central Park were replaced by a view of a brick wall and a perpetually overflowing dumpster. The scent of fresh orchids Julian insisted on was replaced by the smell of damp old wood and her neighbor's cooking. She unpacked the few boxes Julian's men hadn't accidentally misplaced. Her books, her precious companions, filled makeshift shelves. Her research notes on the artist Artemisia Gentileschi, a female painter who had triumphed over immense personal violation and patriarchal oppression, felt like a cruel joke. Emma had once dreamed of writing the definitive book on her. Now she could barely summon the energy to read the titles. Julian's curse echoed in the cramped space. No one will ever want you. It became the soundtrack to her lonely nights. She'd scroll through social media, a masochistic ritual. Julian was thriving. He was photographed with A-list actors giving talks at prestigious conferences, and his new girlfriend, a model named Crystal, was splashed across his Instagram, always laughing, always perfect. He had already rewritten their history, painting himself as the patient husband who had finally freed himself from a negative and uninspiring partner. His followers lapped it up, flooding his comments with praise for his strength and authenticity. Emma's only lifeline was Chloe Davies. Chloe, a sharp-tongued, fiercely loyal art gallery owner, had been her friend since college. She'd never liked Julian, calling him a self-help vampire who drains the life out of everyone and sells it back to them in a paperback. Chloe showed up one Friday evening, armed with 2 bottles of expensive wine and a container of pad thai. She took one look at the apartment, and Emma's gaunt face and her expression hardened. "Okay, that's it," Chloe declared, setting the food on a wobbly IKEA table. "The moping is officially over. Operation Phoenix begins now." Emma gave a weak smile. "I don't feel much like a mythical bird, Chloe. More like a pigeon with a broken wing." "Nonsense," Chloe said, pouring a generous glass of Sancerre. "You are Emma Vance. You can spot a forged Botticelli from 20 paces, and you can recite Vasari's Lives of the Artists backwards. That sociopath didn't give you your brain. He just tried to convince you not to use it. We just need to remind you who you are." Chloe talked for hours, her voice filling the quiet apartment with life. She spoke of new artists, of gallery openings, of the vibrant world that Emma had been cut off from. Slowly, tentatively, Emma found herself correcting a point Chloe made about the use of lapis lazuli in the Scrovegni chapel, the old fire of her intellect flickering faintly. "See, she's still in there," Chloe said, pointing at her with a shrimp-laden fork. "Now for the main event." She reached into her designer tote bag and pulled out a thick, cream-colored envelope. The cardstock was heavy, expensive. The calligraphy was elegant. "What's this?" Emma asked. "This," Chloe said with a flourish, "is your re-entry into the world. It's the St. Jude's Foundation Annual Benefit Gala, the biggest art world event of the fall. They're auctioning off a recently discovered Degas sketch. Everyone who is anyone will be there. Emma recoiled as if the envelope were on fire. Chloe, no, I can't. What would I wear? Who would I talk to? Julian will be there. He's a patron. First, Chloe said, ticking the points off on her fingers, I have a friend at Marchesa who owes me a colossal favor. You will be dressed in a gown that will make angels weep. Second, you will talk to me. And third, screw Julian. Seeing you there looking magnificent and not giving a damn about him will be like a stake through his narcissistic heart. It's the perfect revenge. I don't want revenge, Chloe. I just want to be invisible. Too bad, Chloe countered. Invisibility is cancelled. You've spent a decade in the shadows. It's time to stand in the light. Not for him, not for anyone else. For you. Remember the woman who wanted to write the Gentileschi book? The one who was passionate and brilliant? She wouldn't hide from a bully in a bespoke suit. She'd face him. Emma looked at the invitation. The St. Jude's Foundation. The very name felt like a sign. She thought of Julian's parting words, the poison of his curse. You will die alone. Maybe he was right. Or maybe, just maybe, Chloe was. Maybe the only way to break a curse was to defy it. She took a deep breath, the first one that felt like it reached the bottom of her lungs in months. Okay, she said, her voice stronger than it had been all evening. Okay, I'll go. Chloe's smile was triumphant. That's my girl. Now let's finish this wine. We have a phoenix to raise from the ashes. The ballroom of the Pierre Hotel was a galaxy of glittering chandeliers and even more glittering people. The air hummed with the low thrum of powerful conversations, scented with expensive perfume and ambition. Emma felt a wave of vertigo. For years, she had navigated these events at Julian's side, a silent accessory. Tonight, she was on her own, and it was terrifying. Chloe, true to her word, had worked magic. The Marchesa gown was a masterpiece of midnight blue silk that shimmered with every movement. It was elegant, understated, and fit her as if it were spun just for her. Her hair was swept up in a loose romantic chignon, and for the first time in a long time, the woman staring back at her from the reflection in a champagne flute looked not like a victim, but like herself. Stop hiding behind the ficus, Chloe hissed, pulling her gently by the arm. You look like a goddess. Own it. They circulated Chloe, greeting people with air kisses and sharp witticisms. Emma managed a few polite smiles, but her heart was hammering against her ribs. She kept scanning the crowd for Julian, a primal sense of dread coiling in her stomach. The auction began. The auctioneer, a man with a plummy British accent and a theatrical flair, charmed the room into parting with extraordinary sums of money for art vacations and experiences. Emma found herself genuinely captivated by the art, her professional eye assessing the works, her mind momentarily distracted from her anxiety. The main event was the Degas sketch, a delicate, intimate drawing of a ballerina tying her shoe. Bidding was fierce, paddles shooting up across the room. Emma watched mesmerized when she saw him. Julian. He was sitting at a prominent front table, his arm possessively around Crystal's chair, his paddle held high. He wanted the Degas. Of course he did. It was a trophy. Emma felt a chill and turned away, needing to escape. I need some air, she murmured to Chloe, slipping away from their table towards a set of French doors that led to a small, secluded terrace. The cool night air was a balm. The terrace was blessedly empty, overlooking a quiet courtyard garden. She leaned against the balustrade, closing her eyes, trying to will away the image of Julian's smug face. This was a mistake. She wasn't ready. It's a beautiful piece, isn't it, the Degas? The voice was deep, calm, and startlingly close. Emma's eyes snapped open. A man was standing a few feet away, half hidden in the shadows, looking not at her, but out at the garden. He was tall, dressed in a perfectly tailored tuxedo, but he wore it with a kind of casual indifference, as if it were a second skin. Yes, Emma found herself saying, her voice a little breathless. His use of line, it's so economical, but it captures the entire weight and strain of the moment. It's not just a pretty picture. The man turned his head slightly, and she caught a glimpse of his profile in the dim light. Strong jaw, thoughtful eyes, an air of quiet intensity that was the polar opposite of Julian's performative charisma. There was something familiar about him, but she couldn't place it. Most people just see the ballerina, he said, his gaze now on her. His eyes were a startling shade of grey, like a stormy sea. You see the work. A blush rose on her cheeks. It was the first time in years anyone had seen her, and not the woman standing next to Julian Thorne. I studied art history. It was my field. Was he asked, a note of genuine curiosity in his voice. Is she corrected herself, a spark of her old self igniting. It is my field. He smiled, a small, genuine smile that transformed his serious face. Good. An awkward, yet not uncomfortable silence fell between them. From inside, they could hear the auctioneer's voice rising to a crescendo. Sold to Mr. Julian Thorne. Emma flinched, the sound of his name a physical blow. She wrapped her arms around herself, the cold returning. The stranger's perceptive eyes missed nothing. You know him, he stated. It wasn't a question. She gave a wry, bitter laugh. He's my ex-husband. The divorce was finalized yesterday. The words tumbled out before she could stop them. She instantly regretted it. Why was she dumping her baggage on this handsome stranger? But he didn't recoil or offer empty platitudes. He just nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. I'm sorry, he said, and it sounded like he actually meant for the turmoil, not for the divorce itself. She shook her head, trying to dismiss it. It's fine. I should go back inside. Wait, he said, taking a step closer. The space between them seemed to crackle with an unexpected energy. My name is Alistair. He extended his hand. She placed hers in it. His grip was warm, firm, and surprisingly gentle. A jolt, like a static shock, shot up her arm. Emma, she replied. Emma, he repeated, as if testing the name on his tongue. It was a pleasure to meet you, Emma, who sees the work. He held her hand for a fraction of a second longer than necessary. As she turned to walk back inside, her heart doing a strange, unfamiliar flutter, he spoke again, his voice soft. For what it's worth, he didn't deserve that sketch. He only sees the ballerina. Emma walked back into the ballroom, her mind reeling. She didn't see the rest of the auction. She didn't even notice when Chloe returned to the table. She was consumed by the brief, intense connection with the man on the terrace, Alistair. As the gala wound down, Chloe helped her navigate the exit. They were waiting for their car when a flurry of activity erupted near the main entrance. A swarm of paparazzi, who had been waiting for a politician to leave, suddenly turned their lenses towards the doors. Alistair emerged. And suddenly, Emma understood. The flashes were blinding. Shouts of his name echoed in the night. Alistair Sterling. The Alistair Sterling. The reclusive tech billionaire. The prodigy who had made his fortune in sustainable energy and now ran the Sterling Foundation, one of the world's largest philanthropic organizations. He was notoriously private, rarely photographed, and his presence here was a major event. He seemed unfazed by the chaos, his expression impassive as his security team tried to clear a path. His gaze swept the crowd, and for a heart-stopping moment, his eyes met Emma's. There was a flicker of recognition, a ghost of the smile she'd seen on the terrace. Chloe was gaping. "Oh my God, you were talking to Alistair Sterling, the great white whale of the Forbes list." Before Emma could answer, the crowd surged. A clumsy photographer stumbled backward, bumping into Emma and sending her off balance. She gasped, expecting to fall, but a strong hand shot out and caught her arm, steadying her. Another hand instinctively found hers, lacing their fingers together in a firm, protective grip. It was Alistair. He had broken from his security cordon and was suddenly right there, his body shielding hers from the jostling crowd. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice low and concerned, meant only for her. She could only nod, speechless. The world seemed to slow down. The roar of the paparazzi, the shouting, it all faded into a dull hum. All she could feel was the warmth of his hand, the solid presence of him next to her. It lasted only for a few seconds. His security team quickly enveloped them, guiding them towards a waiting black sedan, a car far more imposing than the Uber they had called. He opened the back door, still holding her hand, and looked at her. "Let me give you a ride," he said. It wasn't a request. Dumbly, she nodded again and slid into the plush leather interior. Chloe scrambled in after her, wide-eyed. Alistair followed, and the door shut with a heavy, satisfying thud, sealing them in a cocoon of silence. The car pulled away from the curb, leaving the flashing lights behind. Emma looked down. Her hand was still linked with his. Across the street, hidden in the shadows, a freelance paparazzo, who had missed the main scrum, lowered his camera. He hadn't gotten a clear shot of Sterling's face, but he'd gotten something else, something intimate and intriguing. A close-up of their hands perfectly intertwined, a story in a single frame. He smiled. This was better than a politician. This was gold. Emma woke up to the sound of a hurricane. Not a literal one, but the digital tempest of her phone vibrating violently on her bedside table. It buzzed and chirped with a relentless, frantic energy she'd never experienced before. Groggily, she reached for it, her mind still fuzzy from the surreal events of the previous night. Alistair's driver had dropped her and Chloe off, a polite and formal goodbye hanging in the air. The feeling of his hand in hers lingered like a phantom limb. She squinted at the screen. 347 new text messages, 98 missed calls, a torrent of notifications from Instagram, Twitter, and news apps she didn't even remember installing. Her blood ran cold. This was the kind of attention Julian received, not her. Her thumb trembled as she swiped to open a text from Chloe. It was a string of incoherent capital letters and a link. "Chloe, Emma. Oh my God, holy Sikh, look at this now." With a deep sense of foreboding, she clicked the link. It took her to the homepage of TMZ. And there it was. The lead story. The photograph. It was an artful shot, tightly framed and undeniable. Two hands. Her hand, recognizable by the delicate silver ring her grandmother had left her, was entwined with a man's larger, stronger hand. The cuff of a tuxedo and a sliver of an impossibly expensive-looking watch were visible. The headline screamed, "Mystery Woman, Reclusive Billionaire, Alistair Sterling, in Shockingly Public Romance." She dropped the phone as if it had burned her. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. She scrambled to open other news sites. Page 6. The Daily Mail, Vanity Fair. It was everywhere. The same photo. The same breathless speculation. Who is Alistair Sterling's secret girlfriend, the handhold seen round the world? Sources say the woman is a stunning brunette who spent the evening at the St. Jude's Gala with the tech mogul. She was the mystery woman, the stunning brunette. It felt like she was reading about a character in a novel, not herself. Then her stomach dropped as she saw the comments section. The digital mob was already at work. Sleuths were trying to identify her. And then someone did. A gossip columnist with a long memory posted a picture of her from 3 years ago standing behind Julian at a book launch. The narrative shifted with whiplash speed. Update: Sterling's mystery woman identified as Emma Vance, ex-wife of self-help guru Julian Thorne. And that's when the second storm hit. Julian's storm. He hadn't waited. He hadn't stayed silent. He had gone on the offensive with brutal surgical precision. He posted a statement on his Instagram, a platform with 20 million followers. It was a masterclass in manipulation, cloaked in his signature brand of faux vulnerability. The post was a picture of him looking pensively out a window, a cup of tea in his hands. The caption began, "Friends, many of you have been asking me about the recent news. It is with a heavy heart that I must address this. As you know, I have recently gone through a painful and private separation. I have tried to handle this with dignity and grace, wishing only the best for Emma. To see these photos today is deeply concerning." Emma felt sick. Concerned, I have always been a supporter of Emma, even as we grew apart. But I fear she is in a vulnerable place right now. To see her latch onto a man of such immense wealth and power so quickly, literally the day after our divorce was finalized, is alarming. I pray that she is not being taken advantage of, and that this is not a cry for help or a desperate attempt to fill a void. I am worried for her well-being. I will be making no further comment on this matter, as I wish to focus on healing. Please send her your positive energy. It was diabolical. In one fell swoop, he had painted her as a mentally unstable, desperate gold digger. He was the concerned, sensitive ex-husband. She was the pathetic, grasping woman. He had co-opted the language of therapy and wellness, a language she had helped him perfect, and turned it into a weapon against her. The comments were a tidal wave of vitriol aimed squarely at her. Wow, she didn't waste any time, did she, gold digger alert? Poor Julian. He's so classy. She's clearly a mess. I knew there was a reason he left her. She sounds like a parasite. Hope Alistair Sterling sees her for what she is. She's just using him for his money. The curse. You're nothing without me. No one will ever want you. He was making it come true, not by magic, but by the brute force of public opinion. He was branding her, defining her for the entire world, before she could even speak a word in her own defense. Her tiny apartment felt like it was closing in on her. The brick wall outside was a prison. She curled into a ball on her bed, the phone lying face down on the floor, still buzzing, still spewing poison. The shame was suffocating. He had won. He had utterly, completely destroyed her. She had defied his curse for one night, and in return, he had unleashed hell. The tears she had held back for so long finally came not as a gentle rain, but as a racking, hopeless storm. The knocking was soft at first, then more insistent. Emma ignored it, pulling a pillow over her head to block out the world. It was probably a reporter or a process server with a cease and desist letter from Julian's lawyers for besmirching his good name. Emma, it's Chloe. Open this door right now, or I'm calling the fire department and telling them I smell gas and a crazy woman with a vintage toaster. Reluctantly, Emma dragged herself to the door and unbolted it. Chloe swept in her face a mixture of fury and concern. She was holding a large bag from a fancy bakery and the morning papers, which she promptly threw in the trash. "Don't read that garbage," she ordered. "I've already seen it. That man is not a human being. He's a sentient weaponized press release." Chloe took in Emma's tear-streaked face and crumpled form, and her expression softened. "Oh, honey." She enveloped Emma in a hug. "Don't you let him do this to you. Don't you let him win. He already has Chloe," Emma croaked. "Look at what they're saying. The whole world thinks I'm some desperate, grasping social climber. He knew exactly what he was doing." "Of course he did," Chloe said, her voice steely. "This is his playbook. Control the narrative, isolate the target, publicly humiliate. He did it to that journalist who wrote a critical profile of him 2 years ago. Remember? He's a predator." Just then, Emma's intercom buzzed, making them both jump. Emma stared at it in terror. "Don't answer it," she whispered. "It could be the pizza I ordered for moral support," Chloe said, trying to lighten the mood. She pressed the button. "Who is it?" A calm, male voice, devoid of static, came through the speaker. "It's Alistair Sterling." "For Emma Vance." Emma and Chloe froze, staring at each other in disbelief. "Alistair Sterling. Here, at her third-floor walk-up in Brooklyn." "Let him in," Chloe hissed, suddenly galvanized. "For God's sake, Emma, buzz him in." In a daze, Emma pressed the button. A few moments later, there was a quiet knock on her apartment door. She opened it to find him standing there. He was dressed not in a tuxedo, but in dark jeans, a simple gray t-shirt, and a lightweight jacket. He looked younger, less intimidating, but the same quiet intensity radiated from him. He was holding a small, unassuming cardboard box. "Miss Vance." "Emma," he said, his grey eyes searching her face. He saw the tear tracks, the fear. His expression wasn't one of pity, but of a kind of grim understanding. "I know this is an intrusion. May I come in?" She could only nod, stepping aside. He walked into her tiny living room, his presence making the space feel both smaller and safer at the same time. He glanced around at the bookshelves, his eyes lingering on the titles. "I came to apologize," he said, turning back to her. "My presence last night and my carelessness brought this circus upon you. I am truly sorry for that." "It's not your fault," Emma said, finding her voice. "It's his. It's my world that has invaded yours." Alistair countered. "And I have some experience with this, which is why I'm here." He placed the box he was carrying on her coffee table. "This is for you." She opened it cautiously. Inside was a sleek silver device. "It's a secure, encrypted satellite phone," he explained. "Untraceable, unhackable. My personal number is the only one programmed into it. Your current phone is a liability. The press can track it. It can be hacked. This is safe." Emma stared at him, bewildered by the practicality and foresight of the gesture. "I also saw his statement." Alistair continued, his voice hardening almost imperceptibly. "It was a cowardly and calculated attack. He is attempting to define you before you have a chance to define yourself. I will not allow that to happen." Chloe, who had been watching from the kitchen doorway like it was a tennis match, finally spoke up. "Damn right. But how do we fight back? He has 20 million followers who think he's the second coming." Alistair met Chloe's gaze, giving her a nod of respect. "You don't fight him on his battlefield. You don't sling mud. You render his attacks irrelevant by telling the truth, but on your own terms." He looked back at Emma, his focus entirely on her. "He's accused you of being a gold digger. So we show them you have no interest in my money. He's painted you as unstable, so we show them your strength and intelligence. A spark of anger, hot and clean, finally burned through Emma's despair. He built his entire empire on my work. The words hung in the air. Alistair's expression sharpened. What do you mean, his book? Emma said, the story pouring out of her now. The Architect of You. It was supposed to be my book. My dissertation was on the philosophical concept of the self in Renaissance art, how artists and thinkers of the time constructed their public and private personas. It was about authenticity legacy, building a life of substance. I had a manuscript, years of research. Julian, he took it. He read it, simplified it, stripped out all the academic nuance, and repackaged it with pop psychology buzzwords. He stole my soul and sold it as a self-help guide. Chloe looked horrified. Emma, you never told me it was that direct. I was ashamed, Emma admitted. And he convinced me that no one would ever believe me, that it was our project. Alistair was silent for a long moment, his jaw tight. He looked from the pain in Emma's face to the bookshelves crammed with her life's passion. Do you have proof? He asked quietly. Drafts, notes, emails. Emma's heart leaped. Yes, they're in storage, old laptops, boxes of notes. I have everything. Alistair's expression was now one of cold, clear purpose. He was no longer just a handsome stranger or a reclusive billionaire. He was an ally, a powerful one. Then, we have a new plan, he said. We are no longer on the defensive. He wrote that he's concerned about you. Let's give him something to be genuinely concerned about. He looked directly at Emma, and for the first time, she saw not just kindness, but a deep, formidable strength that he was offering to share. He tried to take your voice, Emma. I think it's time the world finally heard it. The next week was a whirlwind of covert operations and quiet strategy orchestrated from Alistair Sterling's minimalist Soho office, a place that felt more like a modern art gallery than a corporate headquarters. There were no reporters outside, no paparazzi. Alistair's world was protected by a level of security and discretion that was an art form in itself. His team, a small group of fiercely loyal and terrifyingly competent individuals, retrieved Emma's boxes from storage. They worked with a forensic IT specialist who recovered every draft, every time-stamped note, every email exchange from her old hard drives. They laid it all out on a large conference table, a mountain of evidence that traced the intellectual genesis of the Architect of You directly and unequivocally to Emma. There were her early manuscripts full of complex academic arguments next to Julian's later dumbed-down versions with his handwritten notes in the margins changing her phrasing into marketable sound bites. It was a clear and damning paper trail of intellectual theft. Seeing it all laid out, Emma felt a profound sense of validation, followed by a surge of cold fury. He didn't just steal my words, she said to Alistair, her voice shaking with emotion. He stole my entire thesis on life. And then he used it to lecture the world and me about authenticity. Alistair stood beside her, his presence a steady anchor. Over the past few days, their alliance had deepened into something more. They'd spent hours talking not just about Julian, but about everything. She learned about his own past with the media, a vicious, untrue story about his family that had made him retreat from public life years ago. He learned about her passion for Artemisia Gentileschi, and he listened, truly listened, with an intensity that made her feel seen and heard in a way she never had with Julian. A quiet, powerful intimacy was growing between them, forged in the crucible of their shared crisis. He won't get away with it, Alistair said, his voice low and resolute. Now, We need to choose our moment. The moment presented itself a few days later. An invitation arrived for Julian to be the keynote speaker at the Global Integrity Summit, a Davos-like conference for tech leaders and media personalities. His topic, dripping with irony, was truth and transparency in the digital age. "It's perfect," Chloe said, her eyes gleaming. "It's his home turf. He'll feel untouchable. The hubris will be off the charts. He'll have the whole event locked down," Emma countered, a knot of anxiety tightening in her stomach. "I can't just walk in and accuse him." "You won't have to," Alistair said. He tapped a few commands into his tablet. A picture of a woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense haircut appeared on the screen. "This is Sarah Jenkins. She's moderating his keynote. She's one of the toughest investigative journalists in the business. She owes my foundation a favor for funding her documentary on dark money in politics. More importantly, she hates frauds." The plan was audacious. Sarah Jenkins, armed with a dossier of Emma's evidence, would conduct the Q&A after Julian's speech. She wouldn't ambush him with accusations. She would do it with his own words and with Emma's. The day of the summit, Emma felt sick with nerves. She wasn't at the conference hall. She was with Alistair and Chloe in a secure viewing suite nearby, watching the live feed on a massive screen. She had done her part. She had written a formal, eloquent statement and had given Sarah Jenkins her blessing to use her research, her words, her story. The broadcast began. There was Julian on a massive stage, bathed in a reverent blue light. He was at the peak of his powers, delivering a smooth, charismatic speech about the importance of living an authentic life. He even had the gall to reference his divorce. "Recently," he said, his voice thick with false emotion, "I had to make a difficult choice to align my private life with my public values of honesty and growth. It was painful, but living your truth is never easy." Emma felt Alistair's hand find hers under the table. She gripped it tightly. Julian finished his speech to thunderous applause. He sat down beaming as Sarah Jenkins took the seat opposite him. She started with a few softball questions, lulling him into a state of comfortable arrogance. Then she shifted. "Julian, your book, The Architect of You, is built on a very powerful central metaphor of constructing a life. It's incredibly detailed. I was curious about your research process." Julian preened. "It was years of work, deep personal intellectual exploration. It really came from my soul." "Interesting," Sarah said, looking down at her notes. "Because I have here some academic papers from 2012, written by a then Emma Vance, that explore the exact same theme, the construction of persona in the Renaissance. The language is remarkably similar. For instance, you write, 'To be authentic is to be the sole architect of your own reality.' A fascinating turn of phrase. Almost identical to Ms. Vance's 2011 dissertation proposal, which states, 'The Renaissance ideal was to be the sole architect of one's public reality.'" A flicker of panic in Julian's eyes. The audience murmured. Sarah pressed on her voice like ice. "In Chapter 3, you discuss the facade of legacy, Ms. Vance's research uses the exact same term, the facade of legacy, in relation to the Medici family. On page 184, you use an anecdote about Michelangelo. That anecdote is lifted almost verbatim from an email Ms. Vance sent you in 2013, which we have a copy of. Shall I go on?" The color drained from Julian's face. He was sputtering, trying to interrupt. This is an ambush. My work with my ex-wife was a collaboration. She was my partner. Was she a collaborator when you registered the copyright solely in your name?" Sarah countered, her voice sharp. Was she a collaborator when you pocketed the entirety of the 8-figure advance? We spoke to your publisher. Her name is not mentioned on any contract. In fact, we have a statement from Ms. Vance herself. And then on the giant screen behind the stage, a picture of Emma appeared. Not a paparazzi shot, but a professional, dignified headshot they had taken days before. Beside it, her statement began to scroll. "I am not a victim or a gold digger," the statement read. "I am a scholar. The core concepts, the research, and the intellectual framework of the architect of you were my work. I am proud of that work, and I will not allow it to be used to promote a false narrative of authenticity, nor to be used as a weapon to publicly shame me. The truth, as Mr. Thorne is so fond of saying, has a way of coming out." The room was in stunned silence. Julian Thorne, the great guru of truth, was staring at the screen, his face a mask of pure, unadulterated horror. His carefully constructed world was crumbling around him, live in front of his most important peers. He was being exposed not just as a liar, but as a thief. The cameras zoomed in on his face, no longer smug, but pale and sweating. The architect had been unmasked, revealing nothing but a hollow frame behind the beautiful facade. The reckoning had arrived. The silence in the conference hall was a living entity. It was thick, heavy, and absolute. On the massive screen, Julian Thorne's face, once a carefully curated mask of enlightened confidence, was now a canvas of pure, unfiltered horror. The camera operator, sensing a historic moment, held the close-up, refusing to cut away. The world watched as the architect of you was publicly deconstructed beam by rotten beam. He didn't just look guilty, he looked erased. In the quiet viewing suite, the only sound was the sharp intake of Chloe's breath. Emma sat perfectly still, her hand held firmly in Alistair's. She wasn't watching Julian's face. She was watching the words on the screen. Her words, her truth, finally illuminated for all to see. It wasn't a feeling of triumph that washed over her, but one of profound, solemn relief, like a patient taking their first breath after a long and suffocating fever. The noise in her head, the constant echo of Julian's gaslighting, and her own self-doubt had finally ceased. Alistair squeezed her hand gently. "How do you feel?" he asked, his voice low. "Quiet." She whispered, a small, wondering smile touching her lips. "The storm. I think it's finally over." He brought her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles, a gesture of profound respect. "No," he said, his grey eyes soft but resolute. "The storm is just beginning for him. For you, this is the dawn." The fallout was a digital tsunami. Before Julian could even be escorted off the stage by stunned event staff, the clip was being sliced, diced, and shared across every platform. Thorne fraud, The Great Pretender, and his stand with Emma Vance exploded globally. The initial trickle of outrage became a flood. Celebrities who had once touted his book as their Bible posted hurried statements of condemnation. Brands that had sponsored his podcast issued press releases severing all ties. His publisher, facing a public relations nightmare, released a statement within 3 hours. "In light of new information regarding the authorship of The Architect of You, we are immediately suspending all promotion and distribution of the title and will be conducting a full review of our relationship with Mr. Thorne." It was corporate speak for a public execution. Crystal, his model girlfriend, quietly deleted every photo of him from her Instagram feed. His powerful friends stopped returning his calls. The machine that had protected and promoted him turned on him with merciless efficiency. The final humiliating image came a week later, a grainy paparazzi photo of Julian unshaven and haggard in a wrinkled tracksuit, frantically putting trash bins out in front of his empty penthouse. The man who had preached about designing one's life looked like he had lost the blueprint to his own. Emma, however, refused to get drawn into the spectacle of his demise. While the world feasted on the schadenfreude she and Alistair were building, her new legal team, a phalanx of New York's sharpest minds funded by Alistair, moved with swift precision. The settlement meeting wasn't a negotiation. It was a dictation of terms. Emma sat at the head of the table, calm and composed, as her lawyers laid out the undeniable evidence of intellectual property theft and demanded reparations, not alimony, but a figure representing her share of the book's profits and damages for copyright infringement. Julian's legal team, knowing they were beaten, folded without a fight. With the first transfer of funds, she didn't buy a new apartment or a new wardrobe. Her first act was to sign the charter for the Vance Institute for Historical Studies. Its mission was clear: to fund and promote the work of scholars, particularly women, in fields historically dominated by men. Its first grant was awarded to a young art historian who had discovered compelling evidence that a famous sculpture attributed to a 17th-century master was in fact the work of his uncredited and forgotten sister. Her next meeting was with the acquisitions editor of a prestigious university press. The editor, a woman with kind eyes and a deep respect for academia, didn't just want to publish her original manuscript on Gentileschi. She wanted to publish a new expanded edition. "We also want you to write a new introduction," the editor said, "about your journey, about what it means to reclaim a narrative, your story. It's as important as the history you write about." For the first time, Emma cried. Not tears of sorrow or anger, but of overwhelming gratitude. Throughout it all, Alistair was her silent, steadfast partner. He never overshadowed her, never spoke for her. He simply created a space where she could be heard. Their relationship, born in the glare of a media firestorm, settled into a rhythm that was quiet, private, and deeply authentic. One evening, he came to her small Brooklyn apartment, the apartment she had decided to keep a reminder of, where she had started her new life. He found her covered in flour, attempting to bake bread, her tiny kitchen a chaotic mess. He didn't laugh at the mess. He simply rolled up the sleeves of his expensive shirt, washed his hands, and started helping her knead the dough. "You know," he said, his hands working alongside hers, "my life was very orderly before I met you. Every minute scheduled, every interaction vetted. I'm sorry for disrupting it," she said with a small smile. "Don't be," he replied, stopping to look at her, his eyes serious. "It was orderly, but it was grey. You brought the color back, Emma. You make the noise of the world bearable." A few months later, they stood on the terrace of his penthouse. It was a crisp autumn evening, and the city lights spread out below them like a carpet of fallen stars. The space, unlike Julian's cold, minimalist trophy home, was warm and lived in, filled with books stacked on every surface and art that was challenging and personal. He handed her an advance copy of her book, The Power of Persona Artemisia Gentileschi and the Forging of a Legacy, by Dr. Emma Vance. Her name, her title, her work. She ran her fingers over the embossed letters. "I used to stand in a place just like this and feel like the smallest person in the world," she confessed, her voice soft. "He told me that I was nothing without him, that I would die alone." Alistair wrapped his arms around her from behind, pulling her close. "He was a fool," he murmured into her hair. A man that insecure could never understand a woman like you. He didn't understand the irony of his own curse. Emma leaned back against his chest, finally understanding. He thought it was an ending, she said, a sense of wonder in her voice. But it was a catalyst. If he hadn't said those things, if he hadn't pushed me out so cruelly, I would never have gone to that gala. I would never have met you. I would never have found the courage to fight for my work. Julian's curse wasn't a prophecy. It was an accidental gift. His attempt to consign her to oblivion was the very thing that had forced her into the light. He had meant to be the architect of her destruction, but instead, he had merely laid the foundation for her magnificent reconstruction. She turned in Alistair's arms, looking up at him. The love she saw in his eyes was not the possessive, conditional affection she had once known, but a deep, quiet partnership built on mutual respect and a shared truth. The city lights below no longer seemed to mock her, but to celebrate with her. It was a new dawn, bright and clear, and infinite with promise. And it was all hers. Emma Vance's story is a powerful reminder that our worth is never determined by someone else's opinion, especially the opinion of those who try to diminish us. It's a testament to the fact that the end of one chapter, no matter how painful, is often the necessary prelude to a far better one. Her journey from a cursed ex-wife to a celebrated scholar, hand in hand, with a man who saw her for who she truly was, shows us that the most profound comebacks are rooted in reclaiming our own truth and our own voice. Julian's curse was meant to be her prison, but it became the key that unlocked her true potential.